recorded. There's still people filing in, and that's great. We're going to get started so that we have all these sober living places
Nice.
going in. I love that. That makes me happy. Welcome, everybody. I'm Laura. Vance is on as well, and we're going to be here for the next hour and 15 minutes. This is something that Vance's team and I put together a couple months ago, actually. And our goal tonight is just to talk real about our recovery experience, our addiction and recovery experience, and then really answer questions from you all. So I'm going to turn off chat in a minute. I'm going to have Vance share a 20 or so minute version of your story, Vance. And then I'll share my story. And then that'll leave a good big chunk of time for answering questions from you all. And the way that you can ask questions is you'll raise your hand. I'll tell you how to do that. If you don't want to be shown on video, when you actually ask the question, because you will need to ask with your voice, just turn your video off. That's totally fine. And that's it. A recording will be made available for this after, so I'll send an email out if you have to go early or for whatever reason, or if you want to share it, it'll be made public. And I think that's it. Anything you want to add before we get going, Vance?
Just hi, I saw Ontario, I saw Canada and Australia. I just want to say hello to the entire globe. I'm so glad you guys are being transparent, joining us for the live stream. It's going to be really awesome and powerful for us to all just really connect.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. So I would love to, before we actually begin, if we don't mind, just sort of drop in, take a few breaths, close our eyes, and I have a blessing that I would love to read to sort of bring us in.
Praise God.
So if you are able to, I invite you to close your eyes and take a very deep breath into your belly. And you can exhale out of the mouth. Go ahead and take another deep breath in. And exhale. You can continue to breathe in through your nose and out through your nose. And ground yourself in this moment. So the reason I ask you to close your eyes is to tune out your vision, or to tune your vision in to your inner life, the presence of this moment. So everything else can fall away. Even though we're meeting online, there are people from all over the world, and this process of recovery and this space that we have created here is sacred and is something that deserves presence. And every single one of you who have showed up tonight has experienced addiction in some part of your life, whether it's you or someone you love. You wouldn't be here otherwise. So I want to read a quick blessing called For Belonging. I think that's what all of us want and have ever wanted. May you listen to your longing to be free. May the frames of your belonging be generous enough for your dreams. May you arise each day with a voice of blessing whispering in your heart. May you find a harmony between your soul and your life. May the sanctuary of your soul never become haunted. May you know the eternal longing that lives at the heart of time. May there be kindness in your gaze when you look within. And may you never place walls between the light and yourself. May you allow the wild beauty of the invisible world to gather you, mind you, and embrace you in belonging. Take one more deep breath. And exhale. You may open your eyes if they were closed. So I know for me, the belonging, and I know I'm not alone. I think this is what all of us want. And when it's what I sought in drinking. It's what I sought in everything I reached for. And I have only found it actually in sobriety. So in this space, you belong. We all belong here, all 432 of us. And that's incredible that we have that, right? So Vance, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to pin your video. I'm so grateful to have you here, and I'm grateful that we connected and that we get to do this. For me, as a Colorado girl who watched the Broncos and, you know, was an Elway era Bronco kid, you know, it was a special surprise to get an email from your team, and just sort of this, to me, the sort of miracles of recovery just never stop.
Right.
And to be able to connect with, we have extraordinarily different stories and backgrounds. I've heard your story, but yet we have the same heart, and we've been into the same place, you know. So I'm very grateful you're here.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Well, first, let me say thank you very much for that opening. And for you brothers and sisters out there in the faith, I'm a man of faith, and just I just give all praise to Almighty God for just bringing me out of this darkness that I'll be sharing with you. And as a follower of Jesus Christ, I'm a Christian, and so if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here talking to you today. So with that said, I'm originally from New Jersey, and how I came about being born back on the East Coast there in Jersey, just outside of New York, is my father was a gang member, and he ended up actually being raised by the streets at the time, because his father died at a very young age. And so when you don't have a father in your life, especially, you're raised by the streets. And my dad was a gang member and got in a lot of trouble, and many of his gang members had already gotten killed. And so he was facing a lot of prison time, and he ended up actually opting back in the 50s to join the service. So my dad was stationed out in Arizona. So you have a choice when you were younger back in those days to join the service or go to prison. My dad went to the service, where he, after a while, they're stationed in Arizona, he met a young 15-year-old at a James Brown concert. Did I go to mute somehow?
So sorry, that was me. I'm
Right.
sorry. Go ahead.
So after meeting this young 15-year-old girl, and he was about 20 years old at the time, so I always tell everyone, don't practice that one whenever I go speak to the high school kids. 15-year-olds shouldn't talk to 20-year-olds. Anyway, my dad ended up finding out where this young lady lived at, and he started dating her. She was a sophomore in high school. And eventually, he fell in love with her and asked her to marry him. And they got married and flew back out to New Jersey. And that's where Vance Johnson was born, out in Trenton, New Jersey. Now, there was something that happened, though, when they went to New Jersey, was my father went back to his old ways. And going back to those old ways, it really freaked my mom out. It kind of traumatized her, because he was using, he was selling, he was out doing a lot of crazy stuff. And the other thing he started doing was abusing her. Well, after a while, my sister was born. My mother was really tired of going through the domestic issues and all the craziness. So she decided that she was going to go back to Arizona with my sister and I. And if my dad wanted to be in our lives, he had to come out there. Now, my sister and I are at an age, and many of you will be able to relate with this, where we're old enough to start to witness what's happening in the home. So there was a lot of trauma inside of my home. And as a young kid, watching a mother being beat on, and watching a father coming home high and coming home drunk. There are all different types of drugs, PCP and other things back in those days. But my dad being a functional alcoholic and a functional user, all I could do is, being from the East Coast, keep my mouth shut and not tell people what was happening inside of my home. But I was really traumatized. Well, as time went on, the only thing that really made me feel good was when I watched sports, and my father then becoming my coach in football and baseball and basketball and a little bit of everything. I started to notice how whenever I did really well at sports, not only did it make my father abuse my mother less, but it started to make me feel like now I had a goal and a vision to be famous one day. And so then what I did was I separated myself from the other athletes, and I focused on creating an identity. And as time went on, I became so good, guys, in running track and playing football that I was one of the best in the country. It got to the point where I literally represented the United States of America over in Caracas, Venezuela, and I won the gold medal. So I was an American gold medalist back when I was in my teenage years. I did really good in football, making touchdowns. It made my father proud. It made him beat on my mother less. And so I saw myself literally trying to save my mother's life by doing things that would take the trauma away from what's happening in the home and turn all of the focus on myself. Well, it got to a point where I got really angry. I wanted to kill my dad at one point when I was young because I hated him for what he was doing to my mother. Introduced now pornography. So I would sneak in my dad's room and I would watch all these magazines that he had in his closets and these VHS things of people having sex. Now, I didn't have a girlfriend at the time, but I was still stuck on watching people have sex. I hadn't done any drugs or alcohol at the time because I didn't want to be like my father. Well, long story short, I go through junior high school, I go through high school, I stay close to home and go to the University of Arizona there in Tucson, Arizona, because I want to stay close home to mom. And I end up actually talking to a young lady that I was dating shortly in high school, and I end up getting her pregnant, and she has a child, and I don't know how to be a father or a husband. So I leave her and the kid, and I'm just playing football because I want to be great, because this is what I want to do when I grow up. And so her dad wouldn't let me see her anymore. So I was pissed off and ended up sleeping with another girl. Guys, I'm real transparent, so forgive me, but I've got to be transparent because my transparency is going to show my transformation. Long story short, I have 2 girls pregnant. I'm in college. I'm one of the best in the country. I'm not involved in my children's lives. I'm not an addict yet. But when I get drafted by the Denver Broncos, I fly out to Denver, Colorado. And so I'm thinking that I'm somebody now at this time. Well, I had a couple bad games. I dropped the punt one time. The San Francisco 49ers scored a touchdown. And so I knew I was going to get cut. Introduced me to alcohol. I had alcohol for the first time when I was in my early 20s. And I thought, my God, this is the way I'm going to be able to deal with stuff. This is awesome. And I didn't get cut. So I'm drinking alcohol and I'm playing ball. I got introduced to marijuana. So I'm downtown Denver, Colorado, smoking weed. I'm drinking. I'm having a good time. I'm successful. I got money. I'm driving around in $100,000 cars. And I didn't even realize that I was starting to, or down road, thinking that I was on my way up because I was famous. Well, I ended up actually getting another girl pregnant. So here's this 3rd girl pregnant. So I decided I'm not going to be like I was. I'm not going to be like my father. So I'm coping by drinking. I'm coping by smoking weed. And I ended up marrying this young lady because I wanted to be a good father and I wanted to try to be a husband. Well, I found out, guys, after we had come back from Las Vegas to get married, and a few months later, my son was born. I went to work one day, and 2 of my teammates had told me that they were sleeping with my wife. I mean, I'm like, how do we cope when we get traumatized even more? So now not only am I angry because of what's happening in my relationship, but I start drinking more, I start using more, I become a cheater. Guys, I'm driving my car 120, 140 miles an hour on the highway. I get pulled over by the cops, but they won't give me a ticket. They won't put me in jail. Do you know, one time, guys, I got in a car accident going over 100 miles an hour. I crashed. I was high. They took me to the hospital because I was hurt. And so the cops were coming because they had heard that I was using alcohol at the time, actually, and they wanted to do a blood test on me. But I was so high, guys, I told the cops that, I told the doctor that they had to hide me because otherwise I was going to get busted and get cut. They pushed me down by the morgue and hid me. This is how I was getting away with my using during my NFL career. And you guys didn't see anything except for the edited version because my only reality was when I was on the football field making touchdowns. The only time I felt like I was somebody is when I was playing with John Elway and I was making touchdowns. I was going to Super Bowls, but all along I was broken inside. And my only way to cope at the time was by using, by smoking. I started getting introduced to pills because of the injuries that I was having during my career. And even now when I look back and watch myself on the film making touchdowns and hearing the crowds going crazy, I'm so traumatized still looking back at that thinking, my God, if people only knew that I literally had tried to commit suicide often during my career. Literally, I was after one of the Super Bowls trying to cut my wrist to die because I felt like I thought richness and fame and fortune was going to be something that would make me an identity, but literally nobody knew how to relate with me. And so I tried to commit suicide during my career. Now, on a long story short, guys, 10 years in the NFL, I'm using the entire time. I broke up with that particular wife because I found out she was cheating on me. So I got married again. Do you know I was married 4 times, guys, by the time I got out of the NFL? That's how many times I was married. And my only way to get through relationships is to drink and to use drugs and to cope by breaking up and getting in another relationship. So I literally, from childhood, never became the man that I was supposed to be. At the end of 10 years, 3 Super Bowls, one of the best players of all time for the Denver Broncos, I was so broken emotionally, not realizing that once my career was over with, that I was literally going to go straight downhill. After 10 years in the NFL, I remember just walking away from the game. I didn't get cut. I didn't get traded. I just didn't show back up because I didn't want to play anymore. So I walked away from the game, and I realized then now my only way to cope was by using even more relationships, more drugs, more alcohol. I got in more trouble. I started being arrested, but they wouldn't put that in the press at the time. I started to gamble, guys. I started to do all kind of crazy things just to try to fill this emptiness that was happening inside of me. And I know some of you might be able to relate with this. As time goes on, and again, long story short, because it takes forever, you have to get my book to go through the whole thing. I literally, guys, was married 7 times. 7 times. Because I thought another relationship would make Vance somebody. I thought another drug or more alcohol or more pills would make Vance somebody. It got to the point where I opened my own restaurant up. My oldest son comes over and he's spending time with me. His name is Vaughn, and he's just an amazing young man. He goes to college, and he's really close to me. And he's like, Dad, I know you weren't in none of your kids' lives growing up, but I love you and I forgive you for not being in our lives. So my son's hanging out with me on the western slope of Colorado, and I'm like one of the happiest guys in the world because I feel like, at least my son understands where I'm at. More relationships. So I'm breaking up with my 7th marriage. I'm only coping with life because of my brokenness by using. My oldest son tries to get a hold of me, and he can't. And because he had broken his car engine. And so he literally had to take his motorcycle across the mountain to see his grandfather because his mother, because his grandfather had passed away from cancer. And when my son, and the reason why I get a little caught up in this conversation is because what I'm leading to. My son drives across the mountain on his motorcycle, and my son gets killed that night. It was my fault that my son died. I get really emotional about this because I don't ever want to forget that morning when I got the phone call that my son was dead. And it was because I wasn't the father that he needed in his life. I wasn't the dad that are supposed to raise children to love on them and to show them the way they should go in life. I was selfish. And the only way I coped because of my brokenness was by using. And so it didn't matter people's feelings. It didn't matter who I was ripping off. It didn't matter who I was lying to because I wasn't the one with the problem. It was them. The only thing I could do then after my son died was use even more. So now I'm using even more drugs. I'm using even more alcohol. I'm using everything I can just to get away from me because I hate myself. And I don't even care if I die. One night, I was using so much that I felt myself slipping literally. I called my mother and told my mom, I'm gonna die tonight. So my mother rushes over, guys, to pick me up, and we raced to the hospital. And by the time I walked to the hospital door, which I literally don't remember most of it except for falling down at the hospital door, I fell down on the ground, and I'm gonna show you guys something here. I fell on the ground, and literally they induced me into a 28-day coma. My body was shutting down. After 24 days, they saw that things were shutting down in my body and that I was gonna die. And so what they did was they told my mother and my father that we got to pull the plug on your son, he's going to die. And my mom said, I can't do that. Please call his kids. So they put all of my children, which I had 6 kids at the time, on a conference call. And you know what they all said? F him. Let him die. We hate him. He wasn't in our life. He was not a good father. Let him die. So they took the ventilators off of me. And what they do is they take the ventilators off and they prop you up. And they put oxygen in your nose and wires on your body to just watch your body shut down to die. And I want to show you guys a photo of me. That was me right there. That was around day 26 when my body was shutting down and I was supposed to stop breathing. My sister took that deathbed picture of me. Literally, guys, when I woke up from that coma, I had the strangest out-of-body experience while I was in the coma. I remember seeing 2 different ex-wives come to visit me. I remember seeing 2 pastors come and pray over me. And when I was telling my family that I saw these people during the coma, they were like, Vance, what are you talking about? Those people were here, but you were literally dying. You weren't awake. And I said, but I saw them. Guys, I would see shadows walking into the room after I did wake up. And I started realizing, not even until recently, that those were the demons that were living inside of me. I was addicted, and the enemy wanted to kill me. This young lady, when she talked before about the spiritual world, there's another world outside of the world that we live in our flesh. And it's there to either show you the right way or to destroy you. as I leave that facility, that hospital, I relapsed about 4 months afterwards, and I was crying out to God one day in the middle of a canyon because I could not stop this addiction myself. My 7th ex-wife at the time and a former Tampa Bay Buccaneer, the NFL, all reached out to me. And once I just started to pray, I started to look at this guy online that was in recovery, and I believed that it was possible that if he did it, that I could do it. And so I got on the airplane and I flew out to Florida, and I went to treatment. 28 days in a coma, 28 days in treatment. And when I was in treatment, the thing I wanted to know most was, why did I have to end up in this situation in my life? This is what I felt the Lord tell me. Everything you did was for you. Now your life is going to be for me. And so when I learned that, I realized that it wasn't about Vance anymore. It was about everybody else. It was about the people that I hurt in my life. It was about making amends to my son that was my fault that he died. It was about forgiving people who had abused me, my father, when I was a child. It was about being educated about addiction and about mental illness and how it affects everybody. And so I poured myself into learning about addiction, learning about recovery, and I started to see that there are many roads to recovery. You can believe in God, or you can believe in whatever you want to believe in to have a path to recovery. So it is possible. I'm just the man that knows that I have no reason to live unless there is a God. And my Savior, Jesus Christ, with his grace and mercy, it was a reason now that I know that I can go out and just help people that are struggling all over this country. And so that's all I do every single day. I mean, I'm tired today because I've been talking to people around the country, trying to help them make a decision to get help. Other people who are in recovery to follow me because I know the way to stay clean. I'll stop with this story, guys. This is the person in early recovery, even in treatment. When I was young, we used to have a class where we had to plant a seed in a little piece of metal or a cup inside some dirt, and you have to water it. And eventually that little plant would start to grow out of the cup. Well, eventually when that plant grows out of the cup, everyone's excited about it. But do you know if you pull that plant out of the ground, it's not going to grow. It's going to die. You have to leave it in there, and you have to continue watering it. That's you in your recovery. You're that plant. And you just can't come out and just replant yourself around other people that are still in their addiction. You have to be replanted around other people who are in a community of people in recovery. And that's what I do. I do that in my faith. I go around the country and I share my testimony at different churches. I break stigma because God's just not going to heal everybody. He gave us the power of self-control. And so that's what I tell my brothers and sisters in the church. Listen, you need to go to treatment and get some help so that you can have ears to hear and eyes to see when you read your Bible. And to the people who don't believe in God, I say, you know what? And I'll stop right here with this. Jesus Christ said, I would rather you be cold or hot and not in between, because he knows people that are cold are going to catch on fire. So I'm here for every single person that's suffering, whether you believe or you don't. I want to help you save your life or a loved one's life. And I'm Oglethorpe. I'm an ambassador for a company called Oglethorpe, and we have mental illness and addiction facilities around the country. We have the Vance Johnson Recovery Center, believe it or not, right out here in Las Vegas, Nevada, that we're getting our final accreditation to open up. And if people want to reach out to me, I'm very transparent on my Facebook page called Vance Inspires. I love to communicate with people that are in recovery and people that need help. With that said, I'm sorry I took so much time.
No, you didn't. Yeah, you didn't take so much time. You're perfect. And you have such conviction. And I mean, I've heard your story now several times, and it's so, I don't know. It just goes to show you, you know, when you talk about that restlessness and just trying anything to fill what can't be filled,
Yes.
I get it, you know, and we had very different lives. But thank you. Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks to all your listeners. I mean, I can just feel the energy of the people watching. Some of them were able to relate. And I'm so proud and excited about what you're doing, because this internet you're using, this is your net, right? And I'll be really quick. So if Jesus Christ, he went to find people that were fishers of men because they were fishermen, but this is your net, and you're a fisher of men and women too. So you can help save lives.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, I'm gonna switch the video so I'm on.
I'd love to share your testimony.
It's getting dark here on the East Coast, so I'll be talking as the sun goes down.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'll share my story, a quick version of my story, and then and then we'll turn it over to you all, because I would love for you to ask questions of me and or Vance. All right, set a timer, because I will definitely go over. So I grew up in Colorado. I grew up in a very, you know, sort of suburban, small town Colorado, and lived there until I left for college. So I always start my story. Well, let me back up. First of all,
We can't see you. Can we see you?
you can't?
No, I see myself still.
Oh, shoot. Oh, I see.
There you are.
I had you spotlighted. Now I'm
Okay.
spotlighted.
Okay.
Thank you for telling me that.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me just say this. On July 14th of 2013, I woke up in a hotel room in Denver. It was the morning after my brother's wedding. And I woke up to someone that was not my daughter. And I had traveled to this hotel room, or this hotel, to do my brother's wedding and be part of it. She was the flower girl. I was in the wedding. And I woke up and I was not with my daughter. And I didn't know who I was with. And I woke up to texts and phone calls from family and from the hotel, because I had left my daughter alone overnight in a blackout.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that for me was the sort of start of my sobriety, or my trek to sobriety. So I just want to put a pin in that. That was in 2013. Okay. Now we'll go back to me growing up. 1977, I was born in Colorado, and I grew up in a good family. You know, my parents got divorced when I was 6, and I always bring that up because I can see, you know, I've done a lot of work, and I can see now that at that time, it was when, as a young kid, is when I learned to start shape-shifting to be whatever I needed to be, so that I could not disrupt the peace, so that I could make dad happy or mom happy, or do whatever I needed to do so that everyone else was okay. And essentially, what, you know, it's an intelligent thing to do as a child, because it's a survival, you know, instinct. It's a defense mechanism, but it's what it equates to is lying. You know, you leave yourself, you learn to abandon yourself, and that's what I learned to do at a very young age, was just abandon Laura. And I didn't drink really at all. I drank very little in high school, but at the end of high school, I played sports, and I had always felt this like big energy inside of me, this sort of like overwhelming, like, you know, there's just restlessness, or like I'm not comfortable, you know, and I'll talk about that big energy later. But what I first started to do was medicate it with food, right? And then I learned to medicate it by not eating. So at the end of high school, there was a lot of stuff going on in my life and my family's life and stuff. But at the end of high school, I got a really bad eating disorder. And I learned that I couldn't control my outer world, but I could control my inner world by not eating and over exercising. So I created this little control mechanism, you know, internally. And I also, at that time, started to drink more. And my family owned a restaurant. I could basically, by the time I graduated from high school, I could drink whenever I wanted. You know, it was just, my family, everyone in my family drank. It was sort of, it was just there all the time. Yeah. And I will never forget, I always talk about this one point because it's so telling. And you said something very similar, Vance. So at my high school graduation party, I was teeny tiny. I remember the exact outfit I had on because all I thought about was what my body looked like, you know,
Right.
at that time. And I had all this internal stuff going on, but I had no tools either. And what I learned was to just put a face on and be strong, right? And that strength meant that you just acted like nothing bothered you. So we had this big graduation party. We shut down the restaurant, my family's restaurant, and it was during the day. I started making myself drinks, and I was drinking Bacardi Limon and Diet Coke. I can still like taste it, that awful drink. And I was on my third drink, right? And I remember like pouring it, and just the way that alcohol like smelled, and what it was like when I took a big sip of that full glass, and how it felt going in my body. And I remember so specifically like thinking that I could not even remember what was bothering me an hour ago. The thought that I had was, if I can just stay like this, everything will be okay. And I meant it. Like I sort of remember planning in my mind, like, I'm just going to stay like this. This makes everything possible for me. This makes it okay. So I go to college. I go to a big drinking college. I hang out with people who drink. I moved to Boston after college. I start working in advertising and marketing. Everyone drinks. I always surrounded myself with people who drink like I do. I blended in. It was fine for the most part. I would have bad nights here and there, but Carolyn Knapp says in her book, Drinking a Love Story, that becoming an alcoholic or becoming an addict is a slow, elusive becoming. It's like you cross some line somewhere, and it's really impossible to say when or where. Sometimes I can look back and say that was in me from the beginning, and sometimes I can find certain points where it seems more pronounced, but it was a slow, elusive becoming. There are two points in my life where my drinking really upticked. And one was when after I got married. I panicked. I was like, I don't know if I married the right person, and I can't believe I'm married, and what do I do now? It was just this anxiety of being in a relationship. I had no tools. I had no equipment for being in a serious relationship. And so I started to drink at that feeling, and then I would act out, and then I would drink at that. And then there was like this shame spiral, right? And then the second spike was after I had my daughter. And I remember so distinctly feeling like the wine just stopped working after I became a mom. Whatever it did for me before, whether it brought down my anxiety or it was fun, it just stopped feeling that way. It was just more anxiety. So there's this sort of progression they talk about where drinking starts out as fun, and then it becomes fun with some problems, and then it becomes eventually just problems.
Yeah.
And after I had my daughter, it was pretty much just problems. And I was a mom. But the funny thing is that mommy wine culture was real, and there was nothing like, I just noticed that it was like a foregone conclusion that when we got together with our kids, the little treat that we gave ourselves was that we would drink. And sometimes that would be at noon, sometimes that would be at 2, sometimes it would be at 3, on the weekends or whatever. Plus I worked full time. I had a big job, and I was trying to hold everything up on the back end with alcohol and drugs. So my marriage fell apart, and that was in 2012. When it fell apart, the wheels kind of came off completely, because no one was watching me anymore, right? It was just me, and I could drink the way I wanted to. And when I didn't have my daughter, I would barely come home. And when I did have her, I would just cope, I would just barely squeak by. And I started to be afraid of myself, because I truly didn't know what was going to happen anymore when I drank. And I knew that I would do the math, right? It was like, okay, if I go out tonight, and going out might just mean going out for drinks with like coworkers. If I go out tonight, what is the worst possible thing that could happen? And am I willing to pay that? And maybe it's not sleeping at home. Maybe it's, whatever it is. Am I sleeping with someone I don't want to sleep with, right? Am I willing to pay that? And I'd calculate that risk and go, yeah, I guess so. I'm willing to pay that. I never ever thought though that what happened in that wedding, leaving my daughter alone, I never thought that could happen. I never thought I would put her in danger, even though I'd never thought it would be like that. I always thought that I would find my way back to her. And that morning was about as horrific as anything you could ever imagine. And by God's grace, I didn't lose her, lose custody of her because of that. But unfortunately, that also wasn't the end of my drinking. It was all I had known up until that point. It was the only coping mechanism that I had. And alcohol was part of every part of my life, right? It was part of my work. It was part of my friends. It was part of everything. I just could not imagine a life without it. So I struggled. I call it purgatory. I had one foot in sobriety and one foot in drinking. And I was trying for a year and a half, and I was trying to find a third door, right? Door one is like, Laura gets sober. Nope, don't want that door. Door two is Laura keeps on drinking. Couldn't do that. I knew I would lose my daughter, and then I wouldn't want to live. And so I was searching. There's got to be a way that I can keep drinking, right, but get sober. And we all know that isn't the way it goes. But I fought it hard. And in that time, though, I started going to meetings. I started to taste sobriety and what it was like. And eventually, in September of 2014, I had my last day one. I did not know it would be my last day one. I actually stopped promising myself that I wouldn't drink again. What worked for me was, I call it forgetting forever. It was like when I thought about forever without drinking, or, it was so much despair. I just couldn't do it. And so I just truly said, I'm not going to drink today. And tomorrow, maybe I'll drink. That's fine. We'll deal with it tomorrow, but I'm not going to do that today. And there were many other things too. I was pretty much empty at that point. But that sort of surrender to just what's happening in the moment was what worked for me. And I started writing about my experience. I started writing about it before I even got sober. So now I'll switch into recovery. What I have learned since then, the alcohol, there is a life that is calling us forward. There is a reason that each of us is here. And that big energy that I talked about, that I always felt like I had this big energy, like I'm here for something really big. It was true, and I didn't know exactly what it was, but I had always wanted to write. And I always felt like my career, like what I was doing for work, didn't mean much to me. And I went to this yoga retreat when I was like 20 days sober. And at the end of the retreat, I went to the bookstore and I opened up this book. I picked this book off the shelf, and it's called The Great Work of Your Life by Stephen Cope. And I opened to this page, and the page had a piece of scripture from the Gospel of Thomas. And it said, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. And if you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. And that was it for me. That is, I think, the story of everybody who doesn't, the alcohol was killing me for sure, and would have killed me, but not drinking, but my unused potential and knowing that I was wasting it was a spiritual death that was more painful than anything. And I knew it all along. so I started writing, man. I started writing and talking, and because to me, you know, I knew that this was bigger than just like Laura has a problem with alcohol. I hated the way we talked about alcoholism. I hated the way we talked about recovery. I hated that the only way I could hear about stories about people getting sober was if I went into a private meeting or reading a book. I hated that we would literally are willing to talk about anything else, but we wouldn't talk about this. My friends wouldn't talk about it. My family wouldn't talk about it. It's like you cross this line and then you have a problem and you better go deal with it by yourself and shut up and not ruin the party for everyone else. And I was like, fuck this. This is crazy. Like this whole system is crazy. And I didn't know all my thoughts about it at the time, but I knew that I had to keep pulling the thread on this sort of feeling that there was a much bigger story to tell than just my story. You know, there was a bigger problem than my problem. So I started writing, I started talking, and, you know, long story short, 2016, I ended up leaving my career in marketing and starting to do what I do now. And I'll be 6 years sober this September. And what I was thinking about, you know, what I wanted to say, and what I always think about in terms of recovery and sort of what sobriety feels like to me is this John O'Donohue quote that says, if you could imagine the most incredible story, it would be less incredible than the story of being here. And that's what being a sober person feels like to me. And it makes me like, it makes my just, and it's not because it's easy, you know, it's just that I'm alive and I'm awake and I get to experience it all, right? It's not easy, but my God, I know I'm just like you, Vance. I know that's why I'm here. This is right here is what I'm supposed to be doing. Half of me is like, I can't believe I have this life. And half of me is like, of course you have this life. This is exactly where you're supposed to be. Right. So I'll end there, but, yeah, my final, you know, what recovery looks like for me, I did AA and I did all of the other things too. And I am a firm believer, and there are many paths to recovery. There's no one way to recover. Recovery to me means stepping into this mystery, and accepting paradox as the truth of life. Like, you can't do it alone, and only you can do it. And it's not your fault, and it is your responsibility. And you learn to live in the middle way. So that's all. I'll end there. Where do we got? Oh good, we're at like 8:45, so we got like half hour left. Ooh, I'm sweaty. Thanks to you guys for listening. I'll open up chat. All right. So let's turn it over for questions. So if you would like to ask a question, go ahead and raise your hands. You can click on participants at the bottom and then click raise hand, and I'll just go down the line. I'll ask you to unmute yourself. You can ask a question. Make sure you do have a question, okay? So we want to make sure we get to as many people as possible. So do make sure that you have a question. You can ask both of us. You can ask one of us. It doesn't matter. Yeah, and you can turn your camera off. That's fine. As you cry. Crying is that's the best. I love crying when I do. And yes, this is water out of my window. Okay. There's my timer. Made it. Okay, Amy Wolf. You can unmute yourself, girl.
Hi.
Hi.
This is hilarious because I've been coming to these meetings forever, and this was the first time I'm talking.
Oh.
So I'm a little nervous, but
That's
my
okay.
big thing is, okay, so I have 77 days today for the first time in like a year again.
Amazing.
And again and again. But what I'm noticing is I definitely have this huge hole in my soul, and I don't even know how to go about addressing it or what I need to help fix that, I guess. Because now I'm over exercising, I'm not eating all day, and then I'll binge. And now I've started to smoke cigarettes, which I would never do unless I've been drinking. But now I'm doing all that right now. So obviously I'm not really addressing that issue, and I just don't even know where to begin with it.
Yeah. So. Vance, you want to make comment? And I will too.
Well, first let me ask, are you a person in the faith, or what's your faith background, dear?
I was raised Catholic, but I'm pretty much, I don't have any faith. I mean, I like to say I'm spiritual, but not religious, I guess.
Okay, well, I'm just going to pour something into you. You don't have to take it. It's just that I'm called to do this because this is what I promised God I would do for especially those of us who are out there broken and needing to fill that empty space. And I was empty too. And I promise you, and I want you to listen very carefully, I was $1 million in debt up until just a year ago. It was my fault that my son died. I had broken 7 women's hearts. What reason do I have to live if there is not a God that has a purpose for my life? That's what I had to trust in. And for some reason, as I started to, and I'll be really quick, but I just want to share this with you because I just love you, that Jesus said that my strength is made perfect in your weakness, because I don't have the strength in my own flesh. And so that's the reason why I cry every day in prayer to hold on to my sobriety, which I'm never going to lose, because I'm never going to walk away from the strength that I have in the spirit world that I walk in. And so I just want to pour that into you and just say, God loves you so much. And I promise you, if you just cry out to him, you'll start to feel his presence come over you. And all you got to do is just ask, Lord, if you're there, show me, show me, show me. And then outside of that, I want you to start to just keep being transparent, because your transparency is going to save somebody else's life. Because somebody needs to hear your voice, because your brokenness on the inside, someone else is out there suffering with, and they're going to need to hear you and watch you walk through it so that they can know that it's possible to stay alive on this earth and not use. God bless you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm just so blessed that you shared that with me.
Thank you for your story too.
Thank you.
Amy, I would just say, 77 days is beautiful, and it's still new. And my thing was, and I agree with what Vance said, my thing was, I'm going to attack these things in the order in which they are killing me. And alcohol was killing me, and I'm going to do whatever I need to do so that I just don't drink for a while. And then, yes, because the alcohol isn't the problem, right? It was never the problem. It was the solution. And so you're going to find other solutions to take you out of yourself. This is a slow return, right? It's not immediate. And the fact that you're on here and you're even able to talk, and it is a huge testament to willingness, so ask to be shown. My experience is being of service to others is the best start to help fill that space. And those don't have to be big acts of service. What you did tonight by talking is an act of service, right? So starting that way, you have something to offer, just like Vance says, is a way to help fill that. I'm also a big fan of therapy, so you might want to get on that.
Okay.
Thank you for talking. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Jenna Burke.
Hi, Vance, powerful share. Thank you.
And Jenna, thank you.
So Laura, powerful share. Thank you. Just like Amy, I'm early in sobriety, so my question will kind of be similar. Today I'm 62 days sober, and mind blown. I didn't know I could ever get here. So really proud of that. I feel like I'm always have different versions of purgatory, like you mentioned, Laura, and like I feel like I'm in between not drinking and spiritually fit, and for that here for something big moment and finding my purpose. and feel kind of like I'm just going through the motion. And also, you know, I've gone through some past trauma and, you know, covering up thoughts that you don't want to deal with. And now I don't have the crutch of drinking to cover that up with. And although I'm not drinking, I think I could be doing more. And like, I guess, yes, like, you know, whether it's AA or like following steps and meditation and doing all those things. But I guess mentally, like, I guess, what are your tips for acceptance, for moving past those past traumas and forgiving yourself? You know, like I've tried many different things and I know it might take time and journaling, but I guess I want to hear from you both what worked for you on how to move forward with that.
Acceptance and forgiveness. Okay. Go ahead, Vance.
Laura, you go first.
Okay. So it does take time. Please allow yourself time. The way that I got through shame, which is really what you're talking about, was by listening to other women and men share their stories. And in their stories, I learned that I am not unique, nor am I the worst. We all think we're the worst, right? Mm-hmm. And not just listening, but talking. Because what happens when we talk and when we share is we start to understand our story. And the story is not that Jenna is a piece of shit that got addicted and is depraved and a liar and whatever else you happen to think you are. The story is much bigger than that. And at the base of that story is Jenna was a person in pain that did what she needed to do to survive. And you can hear that story and maybe you absorb one tiny kernel of it, right? But over time, as you start to talk and as you start to listen, people can hold up the vision of who you really are for you until you can accept that yourself. And that's what women in sobriety did for me and still do for me. I am also a big fan of a program of some kind. The work cannot just be done in reading books and meditating yourself. I truly believe you have to work with other people, ideally professionals. Mm-hmm. So that's why I say therapy, a sponsor, some kind of, because trauma, you don't just recover from trauma. Your body has to be involved. You sometimes have to do EMDR. You have to do things that really rewrite, because it's a brain issue. It's a brain processing issue. So it's well beyond just your mental, your intellectual. It's not an intellectual exercise. I freaking wish it was, mm-hmm. because I'd love to solve everything with my own mind. So take an active role in your sobriety, and the shame, the further you get away from these things too, it helps. So time does help, but you have to understand the bigger part of your story. And the key part that you have to understand is that you were a person in pain. Gabor Mate says we should never ask why the addiction, but why the pain. Why the pain? It's obvious from Vance's story where the freaking pain was. And I know why the pain was there. So you did what you had to do in order to survive. Okay, that's the story. And you start from there. And then, girl, give it time. Like, give yourself some grace in your time and some time. It will get better. I promise you that. I can promise you that. Vance, what do you want to add?
Well, I'll add just a little bit. I suffered a lot with mental illness because of the trauma that I grew up around. And so my only coping, obviously, was using. And the CTE that professional football players get, and the suicidal attempts. I mean, literally, I wanted to die, and I tried to kill myself a couple different times. And so when I was only, 50, 60, 70 days clean myself, the thing I needed to do was just really trust the process. And like you mentioned, Laura, there are many roads and paths. So you want to be involved in a community, number one, of other people that are in recovery. Just like I talked about, you're that small plant. So you have to be with other small plants that are going in the same direction. The other thing you need to do is take a look at your life and say this: I need to hold every thought, that I'm having inside of my head captive, because the addiction used to hold you captive. Now you hold that thought captive. And in your transparency, you need to say, in my brokenness, what am I going to do with this? Well, guess what? What you're going through right now is your testimony. Because if you didn't go through what you're going through right now, what would be your testimony? What would be your purpose in life if it wasn't this, what I call, gift that you have to fight against a disease that is trying to destroy you? If you have children, your kids are going to be able to see a victory with mom getting through this. If you have other loved ones that maybe are struggling with addiction, they see you get clean, they're going to say, oh my God, she did it, I can do it. So you have to look outside of yourself, even though there are things going on inside, to know this is bigger than just me. And I'm going to have to get scriptural with you again. I actually counted all joy. And this is from the very beginning, because I had no reason not to use again. I counted all joy when I go through trials and tribulations, because just like when I was an athlete and I had to work out to be strong, to become something great, it's the same thing in your recovery. You got to work it out. And the only way you're going to work it out and get strong is by going through pain. Now, I'm sorry I'm being so masculine right now with this, but I'm just trying to help save lives there. So God bless you. You can do this, I promise you.
I don't mind your masculinity. I think it's fine.
Okay.
It's nice to have some masculinity from here.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Jenna.
Beautiful.
Well, one more thing. Have you guys ever heard the saying, time heals all wounds? It's a lie.
Yeah.
Time don't heal no wounds. The only thing that time does, it allows you to suppress a wound so that when you can be around somebody that used to traumatize you, you could just cope with them. But it just takes a matter of time before they piss you off and you end up relapsing or end up having that anger and hurt inside. The only thing that heals wounds is forgiveness. So I think that was for that young lady. There's somebody she needs to forgive in the past. And so I want you to forgive them, because forgiving them actually is going to be better and more for you than it is for them. Hopefully they'll accept it. I've got 7 ex-wives that still don't forgive me. So, but I'm sorry, because I got on my knees at a church and I swore that it was my fault, that every one of them, they didn't do nothing wrong with me. I was a jerk. I was just a piece of crap, and I destroyed their lives. And right now I still take the blame for it. And so for some reason, guys, and this happened to me today, do you know that out of my 6 kids, 2 of my sons grew up and I never was in their life? God is my witness. I heard from 2 of my sons that I have only talked to twice in the last 30 years. Today,
Wow.
they reached out to me and said, one of them said, Dad, I love you. I want to see you. Another one, and they both came within 10 minutes and they don't even hang out. They don't even know each other. Another one said, Dad, I got arrested and I'm in jail and I want long-term recovery. And I know that you can help me. 2 of my kids did that. So that meant that all those years of my walk in recovery is proof that it was for a reason. And it wasn't about me, it was about everybody else. I'm sorry, I can just go on and on. But
That's amazing. Oh my God. That's huge. No, I'm glad you shared that. And sometimes, Jenna, I mean, the person that you have to sort of forgive the most is yourself. You know, that was the case for me. There are others and you have to forgive others, but I had to forgive myself. We're really good at beating the crap out of ourselves. I'm so happy for you, Vance. That's like an amazing day. It's a miracle. All right, Jennifer.
But God, I like that. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. Hey, Laura, thank you for doing this meeting, and Vance, thank you for your share. I almost wanted to put my hand down because it's like a F and Q. Like I got a lot of my stuff answered just listening, but I'll share a little bit. I have a year and 7 months, and the first year I found kind of easy because I took it as an experiment. I was the experiment. So I just read and went to different meetings of all sorts, and it now becomes the work, right? And where I want to place my trust in that work. And for me, I've always growing up in trauma, all my stuff went into sport, a sport I loved. So I can relate to that, Vance, but nowhere on your level of professionalism or anything, but at my level, at my life. So shortly before I had my daughter, I blew out my knee. So I couldn't return just on the sideline, so to speak. And then I had my daughter, and unbeknownst to me, a year later I was diagnosed with postpartum. So in between all that's when my alcoholism kind of said, "Hey, I'm here for you. You're my best friend. Let me help you along." And I did, and I let it help me along to the detriment of a lot of things that aren't here, because I know I only have a short time with you. I guess so my biggest question is, so as like sports minded, like I'm very a physical person, like I can't meditate well. So when I do meditations, I either listen to a podcast or some music. I need to be stretching or moving or being physical. And I've been told that, well, that's not how you meditate. You need to be still. And I'm like, well, I can't be still because then my mind wanders too much, right? So, but where do I put all that physical energy in that, how my mind works as like a player, a team player, and a coach, because I've coached on lower levels, obviously, but that's how I think. And I don't know how to transfer that energy into my own recovery. Like I don't know how to self-motivate myself physically or to put myself in, like Vance, you said, you kind of got to look at yourself from this way. You're doing it this way now. My mind can't transpose that. And I'm still doing a lot of healing, obviously, with others, with my family, because as you get sober, they start saying stuff or you start showing stuff. And I don't mean making direct amends. I mean, just all I'm doing right now is living amends, right? I'm showing up. If my mom, who's 82, who I just came from her house an hour ago, if she calls now and needs me, I can drive there because I'm sober. That's great, right? My daughter needs me in 2 seconds, I can be there. I just have to live every day with it. And I just find myself lost sometimes in my spiritual aspect. Mm-hmm. So I don't feel like I deserve to ask for too much because there's so many more that are more needy, but I still need help in how to transfer my mind and my energy to uplift my recovery so I can be a better person than where I am right now.
Okay. Vance, go for it.
You said a couple key things, and there were some people actually that were responding, and many of them were saying walking and meditating is where they were thinking that it would be really good for you to direct your energy. And so I was thinking kind of along the same lines, but I was thinking more so pouring that energy into other people that are in early recovery. And so the more you can be connected, to use that voice so that you can share with people your experiences, what you've gone through, where you are in your recovery, and how you're feeling, then people are going to be able to relate with that. The other thing, if you're a person of faith, you need to pour that energy into educating yourself more on that walk that you're walking. And like I said, I'm a man in the faith, and I promise you, and if you wouldn't have said that, I wouldn't have made this comment, but I literally read my Bible every day. And sometimes 6 hours a day, I'm in the Word because I want to know what God has to say about me. And so because of that, it frees me a lot from the bondage of the traps that I would be able to hold, I would hold in my head. And also you made another comment about people. And I'm trying to remember because you said quite a bit. So I was trying to remember something about people. I lost it. Maybe you can say it again, but I'll let you go ahead, Laura, and say your part.
Yeah. I think, what you described is someone with a very busy mind. And we tend to think, I think that most people who live with what we live with have very busy minds. Mm-hmm. So I don't know what came up for me. I don't know if you've ever read Eckhart Tolle, but he has a book called The Power of Now. He has a few books, but that book really talks about how to work with the mind. To me, it's many things. And I know I feel the same way. I can't, meditation, you know, I can't, it's hard. It's extraordinarily hard for me. But you're not the one person in the world who can't do it. I promise. It's a way to work with the mind. So I love Vance's idea of, it's almost like we have to ask to be shown, you know, and not, we tend to think in the West that we control things with our mind, and that everything that what our mind says is the truth. But in reality, you have many voices. You have a body, you have a soul, which I think is, you know, your connection to the divine, and you have a heart, you have emotions. So learning to identify your mind voice as this sort of inner roommate, sort of inner critic, but as not the truth of who you are, I think is tremendously helpful. And practices that help with that. Prayer helps with that. Meditation helps with that. Any spiritual practice helps with that. I would check out Eckhart Tolle and The Power of Now as a really good start for you.
Yeah, and it's like the Tao of Pooh, right? If you slow down, things speed up and go faster for you, in a sense.
Yeah.
But I have to just slow it down.
Well, but what I think you're doing is you're still keeping it in the mind. There's this idea that if I just there's a letting go that has to happen, and allowing another presence to come in. In addiction terms, this is often called the obsession of self. I know I had the obsession of self, and I can go there, you know, and it's not that you think you're so great. It's that you spend a lot of time thinking about yourself and how others are reacting to you, and am I okay, and is this okay? And a spiritual practice is what helps us relieves us of that. So try Eckhart Tolle. That was the first hit that came up for me. So I think you should try it out.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, we have 5 minutes left, so we could do one or two more. So Jennifer, no, I just did Jennifer. With her hand. Oh wait, Shelly, I just lost you because there you go. Okay, Shelly.
Hi.
Hi.
Hey, Laura, I just read your book. Fantastic. And I just wanted to say I relate to a lot of your story, and also to Vance's story, because I too ended up in a coma 4 years ago. And I related when he was saying that he heard things in that coma, because so did I. But the doctors were like, no, she's not here, she's gone, and called my parents, and you know, and said, you better get here. And there's some divine intervention that happened, because I didn't have my parents' name in my wallet or anything like that when this happened. And the nurse looked at my cell phone, and all of a sudden a number came up, just right, and I had a password on my cell phone, and there's no way a number would come up, and it did. But anyways, so it's like a miracle that I'm here. And nurses said that I was responding to somebody in the room. My cousin had just passed away to suicide and addiction, and they said that I was reaching for him. And anyway, it's just so weird that it all happened. But my question was, I still suffer a little bit from the trauma of that, plus severe liver damage, which I find nobody ever talks about, because they told me I had 2 years left to live. And I have a clean bill of health today, clean. And I have one son who still won't talk to me. I have 3 boys, and it's killing me. And you go with that mind, and it's like, 4 years sober, what do I do? What do I do? Do I keep calling him? Do I keep saying, you know, why aren't you, you know, I just don't know what to do. And then Vance answered my story. 2 of his boys called him today, but it's like, and my kids drink and they're teenagers and well, no, they're early adults. Like, but yeah, and it's like, it's so frustrating. You're doing all this good work and you're like wanting some validation and saying, look at me. I did all this for us, and I'm getting a little teary, but yeah. Time doesn't feel. You know, in AA, because I do attend AA, but they say sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. It's so slow sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
God bless you. Thank you so much for being so transparent. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
When I first got clean, I really expected everyone to just say, oh my God, he's clean, and for all my relationships to be restored. And again, because I'm a man of faith, I started to learn that everything like that just takes time when you're in your early recovery, especially. And there's nothing we can do in our flesh to make someone forgive us for what we've done to separate ourselves from them. The only thing we can do is walk it out. And the main thing we do is pray. I promise you, my sons hated me. The first time I ever heard my son call me dad, which I told you I've only talked to him one time in 30 years, was just on Father's Day. He called me from jail and called me dad. So it took 7 years for that son to even respond to my sobriety, because he knew me in my addiction and he knew me in my career, and we never spoke for 34 years except for twice. Once he asked for some money, and just again, he's told me Happy Father's Day. So if you just keep walking it out and knowing that in your prayer, God restores all those relationships. You look like a woman of faith, and so I say God bless you, and you just keep praying and crying out to this God that I know you believe in, and ask him to restore those relationships. And then you be patient and walk out that recovery.
Thank you. Patience, not one of my good suits.
That's okay. You know what? That's okay. Because that's the flesh, and the scriptures say the spirit and the flesh war. So you keep warring. That's a good testimony.
Very cool. Thanks so much, and congratulations.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Shelley. I wouldn't even add to anything to that. I just agree with what Vance. That's okay.
Thank you.
I like crying. That's all we have time for, you guys. I love you for being here. I love having this time. Thank you, Vance, again. Someone was asking what the name of your book is. Can you share that?
The name of my book is called Uncovered.
Nice.
In football, I used to play football. They couldn't cover me, right? It's like I was running around uncovered. Well, now I'm really uncovered because you get to know the whole truth. I was a dog. I was a liar. I was a thief. I was a cheater. I was a drunk. I was a drug addict. I was a piece of crap. But now that man is dead, and now I'm alive. You won't live until you lose yourself. And so that's what I wanted to share with you. And I really hope people can go on my Vance Inspires Facebook page. I'm really transparent and love to communicate. And Laura, thank you so much. What an amazing show you have. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I will, guys, I'll send all of Vance's, when we send the replay for this tomorrow, I'll send all of Vance's information, links to his book and his Facebook page and all that. So thank you for being here. It was wonderful to spend this time with all of you, and have a beautiful rest of your day or night.
God bless you. Thank you, dear.
Bye.